In the past few years, maybe 2-3 years, or even a year, Justin Trudeau has been getting a lot of smoke from everybody. People in Canada, people outside of Canada, people in his parliament, everywhere. Why is that? I do not understand, but I hope this video is going to help us explain, and we're going to be seeing some of the criticism he's been getting. And after now, we're going to have our own discussion, and you can talk to me as well. So let's get to it.
Rogan and Patrick Bet David's harsh condemnation of Justin Trudeau's oppressive policies. Speculation flares on whether voices of conscience are needed urgently in positions of power to counter such failings. Joe Rogan spotlights the terrifying authoritarian tactics used, freezing bank accounts of protesters and even supporters, making clear the stakes if mentalities like Trudeau's are left unchecked by voices of reason. He argues the need for those voices is urgent to prevent escalating oppression. Poilievre spotlights Trudeau callously quadrupling carbon taxes on struggling Canadians, even as food bank usage hits record highs. He criticizes Trudeau for blocking efforts to exempt overtaxed farmers and make food more affordable for the 2 million monthly relying on it. Could Dr. Jordan Peterson have more positive impact on the world as a political leader than his current role as an intellectual combating oppression? Sparked by Peterson's harsh condemnation of Justin Trudeau's crackdown on trucker protests, speculation arises whether direct leadership could prevent such authoritarian overreach. What follows is a fascinating discourse on the role and limitations of politicians versus thinkers in shaping the arc of civilization. Peterson acknowledges the immense sway held by transformative figures like Lincoln and Churchill, yet he firmly defends the domain best suited to him as that of ideas and psychology rather than policy, reaching people directly to inspire personal responsibility and truth-telling in the fight against rising totalitarianism. The ultimate question posed is whether wisdom or power now offers the best antidote as oppression creeps. While admitting politics cannot be ignored, Peterson remains firm. His calling is changing minds through ideas over decades more so than through laws alone.
They're regulating podcasts in Canada.
Look what Trudeau did with the truckers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
We just had one of their guys on to talk about it.
Not just the truckers, but people who donated to the truckers got their bank accounts closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is wild.
Yeah.
But
Really?
Yeah.
Really? You think that's okay?
Guys, hope you got my back if my account gets closed.
Like, that's so not okay. The fact that those people aren't up in arms. The whole country didn't freak out and demand change. Like, you can't have, that's dictatorship stuff. That's what that is. It's Banana Republic stuff.
We do these calls with our top supporters, and we have some in Canada. We have this lady who's been supporting us for years, and she's always fine. And in the middle of this thing, she was like, I'm terrified. I'm not going to be able to eat because they're going to shut down my bank account.
God.
In Canada.
It's so crazy that they think they could do that if people disagree with them. Because that's all they're doing. They're just disagreeing. And they're supporting a protest. It should be, and it was a peaceful protest. Those people did it the right way.
What is shameful is that this prime minister is causing homelessness in this country. He's caused a doubling of the number of people eating at a food bank in Toronto. One single mother in Sydney said, well, this month I had to choose between eating and having heat. My kids are getting fed, but my house is freezing, end quote. The Prime Minister's solution is to quadruple the carbon tax on that single mother and on seniors. Mr. Speaker, we have a common sense Conservative bill to take the carbon tax off farmers and food. Why did the Prime Minister manipulate and intimidate Liberal senators into blocking that bill? Why does he want to tax food right before Christmas?
Mr. Speaker, after all the intimidation and threats from the Conservatives towards parliamentarians on 234, it turns out the only farming the Conservative Party cares about is rage farming. Because all of this was just an attempt to fundraise off of the backs of farmers.
You know, like, there's something I always say, and this thing doesn't sit well in my head when I see it. It feels a little bit dramatic when I see all this clapping and excitement when one party says something the other party says, and the people in the background make it look like a theater or something. We want to hear, like, this is serious stuff here. Like, it needs to be concerning. I don't like all this drama from both sides anyway. It's not just from liberal or from conservative. It's too dramatic, please.
Time and time again, The Conservative leader has shown that he wants to take Canadians back to the Stone Age instead of helping them get ahead. On this side of the House, the Liberal government will always be there to support farmers.
As this Prime Minister raises taxes on food, brings back malnutrition, brings in record-smashing food bank use, the best he can come up with is a bunch of scripted talking points from junior staffers in the PMO. That is outrageous. Canadians are going hungry as Christmas is just around the corner, and a common-sense Conservative bill to take the tax off farmers and food could have helped solve the problem. Why did he manipulate and intimidate senators to keep the tax on the food and make our people go hungry right before Christmas?
I asked the question.
Yeah, with regards to that point, I feel like PM might be spot on that. Canada has a problem of my views, this might not be the case, but just what I think, not a problem, but a challenge or something I feel like is concerning, which is taxation, bureaucracy, and, just having to spend extra money put on top of something. Let's say I wanted to go to the store to buy a bottle of Coke and it was like $1, but there's going to be like some 50 cents that adds up to something, taxation, something, movement. It just has to be something. Like, sometimes it hurts my feelings, Let me give you an example. When I was in Nigeria, the taxes are in the product, right? That was my first shock. When you go to a store to buy something for $1, that dollar has everything. That's the selling price. That's how much you're going to pay when you get to the counter. But in Canada, you just never really know unless you're adding all this cost and expense on your phone, which you can't really do. When you buy something, until you take it to the counter and pay, that's when you see the real price. I'm still trying to get used to this. Like, I've been in the system for some time, but I'm still trying to get used to this. And the rising cost of everything is adding up. When we as foreigners state this thing, I usually get the comments where it's like, people say, if you don't like it, go back to your country. Well, I live here now. This is my home now, and this is your home now. We are on the same page. It's not me saying Canada is a bad place. If it was a bad place, I wouldn't be here in the first place. I'm just saying that we want the place we now live in to be, to be exciting. People don't like to spend money so much. We don't want to waste money. We want to spend the little as possible to get the best. That's it. But in Canada, it's difficult these days.
With you in Canada, because who gets more eyeballs in Canada than you? I don't know. And is Canada in a pretty strange place right now with the way Trudeau's handled things, where he used to talk about freedom and we can't ever make people do anything to their bodies that they don't want to do, and all of it. So, okay, this guy makes sense. Boom. No, if we have to choose between delivering food and delivering this, we're going to choose this, because you're like, this guy sounds like a dictator.
The alarming authoritarian actions and rhetoric from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau regarding the peaceful trucker protests are deeply troubling. When leaders overreach and restrict basic rights and freedoms, silencing dissenting voices, it threatens the very foundations of democracy. The impacts of damaging policies that dismiss common sense and the well-being of regular, vulnerable Canadians are unconscionable, causing suffering through unaffordable living costs and growing food insecurity. Hearing the heart-wrenching stories of ordinary citizens struggling to even heat their homes and feed their families is tragic. Peaceful protest voicing disagreement and a desire for positive change should never be met with repression and retribution from leaders in free societies. And policies callously indifferent to citizens' basic needs demand urgent rethinking guided by wisdom and compassion. Conscientious objection and civil disobedience have a respected history when the social contract fails too many. This heavy-handed suppression of dissent and livelihoods while many suffer is alarming and betrays fundamental liberties Canadians have long treasured.
Is there any aspiration where in a moment like this, with all of these weird things taking place worldwide, where maybe you've sat down behind closed doors with your family, with somebody, and have said, Dad, Jordan, why don't you go in there and see if you can be the leader of a great country like Canada and do something about it? Has that conversation ever taken place at this phase of your life?
Yes.
I would more recommend Jordan Peterson is the advisor to the leader, not the leader. Because I feel like this is my perception of Jordan Peterson. Doesn't mean this is who he is. But my perception of him is he's somebody who only is, how do I put it? He's expressive and can hold his stance when he's really passionate and concerned about a state. Like when he was fighting against the false image of diversity, when he was fighting against, fighting for free speech. That was because of his passion and, how it affected him directly. I feel like a leader should have some level of viciousness across the board so that when he says yes, even when he might not be right, but at least he holds his ground. I kind of doubt Jordan Peterson might have that because he's careful, he's well scripted, he's a word conscientious. I think he likes to use that. But yeah, he's a good person. That's what I'm saying. He's too good, maybe a little too good to be the leader. Just saying, a lot of you might not like that, but I think he's too kind-hearted to be like the leader of a whole nation, like 30 million people. Sometimes a leader has to, show some level of rascality. And Jordan Peterson does not have that. I don't think he does.
And?
Well, I've made a choice all the way through my life. The choice has always been, say, political, sociological versus psychological, or perhaps spiritual. And I've always chosen the psychological work at the level of the individual. And I don't think I'm going to stop doing that. I mean, I have had serious discussions with people about a political career. And first of all, in my current situation, it isn't obvious to me at all that wouldn't be less effective than what I'm already doing. So
that wouldn't be less effective
it'd
than
be
what
less
you're already
effective.
doing.
Yes, it would be less effective for me to.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
I know what you mean by that, but what do you mean by that? I mean, you mean to tell me you're having the same amount of impact now as you would as the PM?
No, I think more.
You would have more.
Right now, you're having more impact?
Yeah. Look, those are hard jobs, and and you get boxed in very quickly, and they're also brutal jobs, and it isn't obvious to me that I have the stomach for it. I don't really like.
You see, he's agreed with what I just said. He doesn't have the stomach for it. Yeah, that's basically what I was saying.
Like fights. In fact, I don't like them at all. Part of the reason that I said what I said back in 2016 when I first stood up and voiced opposition to what the universities were doing and also what my government was doing was because I could see where that was going. I could see that it was going to generate conflict.
Dr. Peterson has chosen to
I
focus.
like that I haven't seen this video before. It's my first time seeing the video. But he basically just summarized in the very best way possible what I was trying to say. I don't know if I put my words together the best way, but he did it for me. Yeah, and I think so too about Jordan Peterson.
Focus his efforts on effecting change at the individual level rather than pursuing a political career. I can understand why he feels that this is the most effective use of his time and talents. The work he does empowers people to take responsibility for their own lives, and that personal transformation ripples outward to positively impact society as a whole. Peterson also makes a fair point that a political role comes with many constraints and brutal fights that may not align with one's strengths or preferences. While I'm sure Peterson could capably serve as a political leader if he so chose, I respect his self-awareness in determining where he can have the most meaningful impact. The considerable influence Jordan already wields through his writings, lectures, and media presence is not to be underestimated. There is undoubtedly great value in bettering the world one person at a time, appealing to individual consciousness rather than imposing change through legislation or policy.
I don't know. I'm trying to think to say that you think you're making a bigger impact right now than being a PM. I have a hard time with that. Let me unpack my question and challenge me on this.
Sure.
So okay. So let's just say, who is Jimmy Fallon? He is hey, I'd like to be like a Johnny Carson, hypothetically. Like that's the Fallon Carson, right? Who is, I don't know, Tucker Carlson, Maybe he's trying to be a O'Reilly, or maybe whoever it is that the lineage that you're going through, right? Okay, who's this latest person trying to have a show? She's trying to be the next Oprah Winfrey, right? Who would you say what Jordan Peterson is doing in history? Who would you have been in the 16th or whatever century we go to? Who is Jordan Peterson? Like, if you were to give a 100 years from now, what are people going to say who Jordan Peterson was? They're not going to say, oh, he was a professor. Oh, he was a clinical psychologist. Oh, he was an author. I don't think they're going to say that. What do you think people are going to correlate you to 100 years from now?
I really have no idea.
So let's just say, is it like a philosopher, Plato? Would you say you're more of a philosopher? Would you say you're more like an Aristotle? Do you see yourself more as that? Do you see yourself as, look, I'm just somebody that's sharing my thoughts and my life experiences, and it's impacting people's lives?
I think I'm a clinical psychologist.
Okay, so that's kind of how you see yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lineage of great clinical psychologists. I'm not saying that I'm in that lineage, but I would say that people who are the most similar to me are people like, well, Carl Rogers might be an example.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't have the same social media platform, but of course no one did. But that's how I see myself intellectually, really as a psychologist, as a clinical psychologist.
Okay.
And I think that the work I'm doing on my lecture tour is a hybrid of being a professor and being a clinical psychologist.
There's a fight going on in your country right now, yours. And people are still listening to this guy. He's still got influence. Don't you think, this may be a good time for you to throw your name in the, and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go, and here's why. Because I think 100 years from now, when we sit here and talk about who was the main philosopher when Lincoln was president, only people in that world are going to know who that person is, but everyone's going to know who Lincoln is and what Lincoln did and the impact he made, right? Do I think his life was a peaceful life? If you've read about Lincoln and his marriage and that one friend he would travel with, and when you go to the Smithsonian and they show the evolution of how much he aged, it's a lot of burden of what this guy went through, right? But he was chosen, and he was the right guy for it. You don't at all feel like,
No, it's again, I think I can detail out some of the reasons.
Sure.
I think I'm more effective doing what I'm doing. Well, I'm working with a lot of political people in the United States, both on the Republican and the Democrat side, all the time. And I couldn't do that if I was involved formally and technically in politics in Canada. Mm-hmm. I'm working with a bunch of people in the UK as well. And I'm working with people in Canada. It's just more effective for me to do what I'm doing.
I don't know about that.
I appreciate the thought-provoking...
I think we said I don't know about that. Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson understands his part and he understands his role and he's playing it very well. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be like a first-class leader as people might perceive him to be. He's going to be a good leader, a kind-hearted leader. He's going to be all of that. He's going to be a good psychological leader. But when it comes to picking fights, can he get in the mud and fight Donald Trump? Let's say Donald Trump becomes president. Would he be able to, talk like that? Maybe.
Questions Patrick Bet David raised about Dr. Peterson's potential impact as a political leader. It's clear that PBD believes Peterson could effect great change on the national or even global stage, much like monumental figures from history such as Abraham Lincoln. He makes a reasonable point that Peterson's influence may extend even further in an official leadership capacity during these turbulent times. However, I respect Dr. Peterson's perspective that he can drive more meaningful change through his current work empowering individuals. As a clinical psychologist and philosopher, he upholds a rich tradition of thinkers who shaped society by transforming how people see themselves and the world. His teachings span ideological divides and boundaries, equipping countless individuals to take responsibility for their lives. He wisely considers that formal political involvement might limit his ability to work with the diverse range of groups and causes he currently engages with. While the allure of leadership positions is understandable, affecting the collective often happens most enduringly by elevating the individual. Dr. Peterson has intuitively leaned into his strengths, insights into the human spirit and condition. One could argue that the wise course is not always the obvious one. Perhaps in a century, his name will be mentioned among the great philosophers rather than politicians. If so, it will be because he followed his purpose. I respect, however, he feels called to uplift humanity during these complex times.
It's like saying if Reagan would have stayed being the B actor or at GE going getting paid $1 million a year to go around the world and talking about his political philosophies and how great GE is, or president of SAG, would he have been able to tell Gorbachev to take that wall down? I don't think so. Would he have influenced a country like Russia to become a little bit more free, where people are staying? They're not leaving. They're a little bit more comfortable staying there because now there's a capitalistic opportunity. It's no longer communism. Karl Marx and Engels and those guys don't have the influence that they had before because Stalin and Lenin and what travesty they did to people. Does that credit go to Gorbachev? Does it go to who? It goes to Reagan, right? So if you think about Churchill and Chamberlain,
it goes to Solzhenitsyn too.
I totally get that.
He was obviously a writer, and so it's it's not like,
you know what I'm saying.
It's not like the political domain doesn't have its purpose and its function, but there's a lot I would have to stop doing if I did that, and it isn't obvious to me that that's the right thing for me to do. Partly again because I started doing what I'm doing back in, say, probably 1985, because I realized that one of the pathways to totalitarian catastrophe was deceit at the individual level. This is something that Solzhenitsyn made very much of, Orwell as well, Huxley as well. These great thinkers concluded in the aftermath of these totalitarian catastrophes that there was an integral link between pathology at the individual level, which was fundamentally the willingness to use deceit in an instrumental manner. I'll lie to you to get what I want, and authoritarian catastrophe, and that it was a direct causal link. And I actually buy that argument. I think that's literally true. And so partly what I'm doing, I hope, is helping people walk through thinking about why telling the truth is a good idea. Not only for them, not as a top-down, shake your finger moral injunction, don't lie, you shouldn't lie, but in a detailed manner to explain the relationship between the instrumental use of deceit and the collapse of civilizations. And that connection is way closer than people think. So one person influences 1,000 people, for sure, in their lifetime, and sometimes a lot more than that. And 1,000, the next rung out from that, 1,000 times 1,000 is 1,000,000, and the next rung out from that is 1,000,000,000. And so you're always at the center of a concentric circle that 2 rungs out contains 1,000,000,000 people. Well, it turns out that what you do matters. And basically what I'm doing, I hope, is touring and talking to people face-to-face in these lectures, for example, and making the case that it's a terrifying case. Everyone says, well, we want meaning in our life. Do you now? Do you now? Because you might ask yourself, what's the more threatening possibility? That nothing you do matters, which means you can pretty much do whatever you want. That's the upside of that nihilistic claim, no responsibility, right? And why not pursue narrow-focused hedonism, since nothing matters anyways? So that's the shadow of nihilism. Or everything you do matters. And it's a lot more terrifying to contemplate that, is that you will be held accountable for everything you do. And I believe that firmly, partly as a consequence of my clinical experience. I never saw any one of my clinical clients ever get away with anything, even once.
Dr. Peterson's commitment to empowering change at the individual level is profound and well.
So that's consequences. Sometimes we do things, we believe in the dark, we're doing these things, or behind closed doors, we're doing these things, and we're going to get away with it. He had a full lecture on that. I had even seen the full lecture. The thing is, if you do something one time, even though you did it behind closed doors and nobody saw you, you still face the consequence. It could be a consequence in habits because you started building a habit. It could be a consequence that eventually might reveal itself to the people. You still face consequences one way or the other. Jordan Peterson, I watch a lot of his lectures, a lot of his videos, and I can already tell where his mind is at, where his ideas or what he wants to do. I mean, I'm not in his mind, but I can, from the way he talks, the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. I think that's how he said. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I can already tell what he wants to do with himself at this point, because he's been pretty verbal and vocal about it.
well considered. There is an integral causal link between deceit, lack of personal responsibility, and societal catastrophe. By helping people comprehend the existential and practical value of truth on an individual level, his teachings counter the chaos that enables authoritarianism. Upholding honesty and meaning for oneself creates positive ripples that spread outward to families, communities, and beyond. Few individuals reach as many lives as Dr. Peterson does currently through writing, lectures, and media. By engaging in face-to-face conversations, he connects with the hearts of crowds in a singular way, inviting them to confront life's hardest questions. I respect how he has discerned where his talents are best deployed to positively affect civilization. He comprehends the terrifying power and responsibility inherent in all we do and say. By choosing to spread this ethos of truth, accountability, and meaning to millions, perhaps he uplifts humanity more enduringly than pursuing political office. There is honor in following one's purpose wherever it may lead.
Okay, that was a very good video. And basically a video that's started off by saying Justin Trudeau and his policies may need some improvements. And people now visualize Jordan Peterson as the person to shape or curtail those excesses. I doubt he wants to go in that route, but a lot of you in the comment section have chosen your guy, which at this point is Pierre Poilievre. If you're new to the channel and you also agree that Pierre Poilievre is your guy, talk to me in the comment section. But it's the end of this one. Smash that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.